Hello, everyone. Welcome back to King's Hammer Speaker Series. Thank you all for joining us. We are here with the amazing Yael Averbuch. I'll let her give you her full story, but I just wanted to mention a few of her many accomplishments. She has had a very impressive collegiate and professional career, founded her own business called Technofootball, and started the NWSL Players Association, which she currently oversees. I think you're going to really love her presentation tonight. If you have any questions this evening, feel free to drop in the chat box wherever you are viewing this, or you can use the hashtag #KHSpeakerSeries. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Yael.
Thank you so much. And hi to everybody listening in. I wish I could meet you all in person, but that'll have to wait till another time. But I'm very excited to talk to everyone tonight. I encourage you to think of questions as I speak. I'm going to leave plenty of time to really interact because I want to talk about the things that you guys wanted to know once I share a little bit more about my journey and some takeaways for you. So the most important thing tonight is I'm going to tell you about myself and about how I fell in love with this sport that I think if you're listening in, we probably all share that common love of the game of soccer. So I'm going to share some things about my journey and what really left kind of the strongest impact on me as a player and in my transition to become a leader in terms of organizing my peers as a professional player, informing the Players Association, and the work I do with Technofootball, my business. So my life is very much centered around this sport, now more off the field than on. But as I share my journey, whether you're a player, a parent, or a coach, hopefully you can jot down some notes and some takeaways that are meant for you. So I'm going to start from the very beginning with my story. And I grew up in New Jersey, and that's where I am now. And I did not grow up in a soccer family. My parents are both lifelong athletes, but knew nothing about the sport of soccer. It was very foreign to us when I initially started playing. And I started playing because my best friend in school played. So maybe similar to some of you. I was 7 when I started. So I'm sure actually a lot of you listening started even before that. But what was ingrained in me from the beginning was that whatever you do, whether it was going to be an instrument, like I said, my parents are lifelong athletes, they're long distance runners, whether you're a runner, whether you are playing tennis or basketball, whatever it is, you might be part of a team sport or a team activity, but what you're doing is an individual pursuit. And what that means is I watched my parents chip away at their training, and they weren't training for anything serious, but they were doing their workouts and their exercising every single day before I woke up for school. And I never heard them make an excuse. It just was in my mind what you do. If you're an athlete, every single day you do your training. So right from the beginning as a soccer player, it was kind of ingrained in me that if I'm a soccer player and I'm participating in this sport, I'm going to start to learn about what it means to be a soccer player. I'm going to take my soccer ball home with me and I'm going to practice things. And I realize now how big of an impact that had on me. So as you're listening, obviously soccer is a team sport. And I know you probably all love your team and your club, but start to think about your individual pursuit within the game, which was my mindset right from the start. And I have a really cool old journal entry because I kept a journal when I was a young player. And when I was about 9, I wrote, I want to be a professional soccer player when I grow up. And I'll be honest with you guys, I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't know what it would take to get there, but I knew that I enjoyed the sport. And some of the boys in my class would say they wanted to be baseball players or basketball players when they grew up. So I said, I want to be a soccer player. And what really set me off along that path, once I wrote that in my journal, was that I had this clear long-term vision. If I wanted to be a professional soccer player, I had to first figure out, what does that look like? So that meant starting to watch soccer games. And at the time, it was a lot more difficult than it is today, where you could go on YouTube or the internet, or there's all these ways to stream games. My dad actually subscribed us to some Italian soccer channel. We didn't understand anything that we were watching or listening to, but we were watching games. And I then started to find out more about the U.S. women's national team. And what does it look like? If I say I want to be a professional soccer player, what does that look like? And from there, when I started to have this vision and this understanding, okay, I have to be able to juggle the ball. I have to be able to strike the ball like this with both feet. I had that understanding. I then started to think about, what do I have to do every day to get closer to that dream? So whatever it is you want to do, whether it's a goal you have in the sport of soccer or in another field, what looked maybe just like a routine for me was really my very passionate striving towards this long-term vision. And it was these routine daily things. Like I would go out for 10 minutes at the bus stop in the morning when I was waiting, and I would juggle the ball. So that's what the daily steps started to look like for me as a soccer player. And then last year I have a quote that I love, and it's kind of a really obvious one, but it just struck me so much when I heard it. And it's, if you do the same thing as everyone else, you'll be just like everyone else. And it's very obvious, right? But if you think about it, you look at this little girl in the picture here. I think I was 7 or 8 when this picture was taken. I had that dream to become a professional soccer player, and probably, I would say, millions of players my age had that same dream. So if I were to just go along and do the same thing as all of those millions of players, I don't think I'd be talking to you today. So we're going to look at what I did along the way that was maybe a little bit more or different, that set me apart from everybody else who had that dream as a young kid. And these are things that you can follow in your own life if you have a dream or a goal to set you apart from everyone else who maybe says they have that same dream or goal. So talking about these big dreams, one of the first things that I realized the importance of was getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And I know this is kind of a thing, you might have heard this before, like get comfortable being uncomfortable. Well, what did that look like for me? I was the only girl in an all boys team for a while. And it wasn't because there were no girls teams for me to play on. There were wonderful elite girls clubs and teams in my area, but I chose to really challenge myself and to play on this local boys team because I knew that that would, it just would raise the bar for me in terms of my personal expectations and what I had to do to even be an average player on the team. For me, it also meant playing up age groups. I guest played a lot. And I was very often in situations where I was uncomfortable and I showed up in a new place and I had to prove myself as a player. So for me, it wasn't, I was very shy. I was not outgoing, but I knew that I had to have the skills where I could show up somewhere new and you speak the same language as everyone, so to speak, on the ball. So that's for me how I started to understand the importance of going outside my comfort zone. And like I mentioned, if you do the same thing as everyone else, you'll be just like everyone else. Well, if you imagine and you visualize this pyramid of all the millions of soccer players who have the same goal as you on the bottom, and then the ones who make it to the next level, maybe that's, you know, playing for an elite club team. So you're already separating yourself. And then maybe it's, you know, doing well and playing varsity high school soccer, if that's what you want to do. That's the next level. And then maybe going and playing college soccer. And that is even a smaller level of the pyramid. And then if you want to play professional soccer, only that little bit of handful of the best college players get to do that. And then from the professional level, if you want to represent your country and play for the national team, we're getting right to the tip of that pyramid, the very top 1%, even less than 1% of players. So getting outside my comfort zone was my way of separating myself and giving myself kind of that leg up on all of these players who maybe said they had that same dream. And the next little bullet here I have says, don't ever let a coach decide how good you will be. And this was a lesson that now looking back, I realized I learned many times along the way. But I'll tell you a quick story as to what this concept comes from and how maybe you can start to think of it in your own life. I was, you know, as a young player, you can see even here in this picture, I was very focused and very serious, and I worked really hard. So right from the beginning, I felt myself progressing pretty quickly, and I was kind of on my way towards this dream and towards this goal I had. So I felt good about it. I felt like, you know what, I'm working hard, it's paying off. But my journey wasn't totally smooth or easy. I was, especially in the boys team I played on, I sat on the bench. I started to try out for things like ODP. And I was part of this ODP team that went on a trip somewhere. I can't even remember where it was, but at the event, I was maybe 14 years old. So I was with some of the best players in my region, some of the best players in the country at this event. So I thought, you know what, I'm doing pretty well. I'm getting there. I'm kind of climbing that pyramid as I had you guys visualize. And at the event, I didn't play at all. Like I didn't even sub in the games. I barely played. And a couple games went by. So I went to the coach and I said, like I had learned to do, you know, coach, what can I do better to play more? Like maybe I thought, you know, I just need to fix something little and I'll play more. And he said, oh, you know what? Well, I just think you're really not athletic enough to play at the highest level. And I mean, when I say I cried, if there are any parents listening in, this will probably really get you if you imagine your player, because I'm sure my mom and dad were distraught at this situation, but I was devastated. Because to me, what I heard was, in that moment, I could work as hard as I wanted, I could do all the right things, but this coach was saying I just didn't have the athletic ability to play at the highest level, to achieve my dream. So it was just, essentially, according to him, it was pretty much over. Like, why should I try? And I cried and I cried, and I went home and I talked to my parents about it. I talked to my coaches and mentors at home. And basically what I decided, without saying this directly in my mind, was that I didn't believe him. I was going to, one, work on my athleticism. I was going to get faster. I was going to get stronger. I was going to become so good with the ball and so quick with my mind that I was going to be able to play quickly, 1, 2 touch. It wouldn't matter if I can run from point A to point B as fast as someone else. And so what I started to do was I started to find a way to do it anyway. And that throughout my career, that was not the first time I was cut from a team. I was told no, I was sat on the bench the whole game. That happened to me a good number of times throughout my career. And even if you go on to play at the highest level, it will happen to you at some point if it hasn't already. And I think the message here is what I subconsciously did at the time is that I didn't let that coach decide how good I will be. Every coach is entitled to their opinion. They can pick the players they want on their team. They can sub you out of the game. They can not sub you in. But they can't determine what you go home and do on your own. They can't determine your strength and your resilience to stick with it. So if you're passionate about something, if you have a goal, whether it's in this sport or in your life outside of it, don't ever let someone else decide how good you will be when it comes down to it. So let's fast forward a little bit. And I went on to play college soccer at the University of North Carolina, which was really cool for me because part of my goals as a young player, when I said I wrote, I want to be a professional soccer player in my journal, was part of that was that I wanted to represent our country and play on the US women's national team. And I wanted to go to UNC and be a Tar Heel. Because at the time when I was growing up, UNC women's soccer, which is still a legendary program, was the place to go. It's where Mia Hamm went, Christine Lilly, all of these famous players who I idolized had played at UNC. So I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to go play at my dream school. And some of the things I learned along the way here that were really important parts of my journey had to do with competing. And if you know anything about UNC women's soccer or the coaching methodology, it's all about what they call the competitive cauldron, which means basically every single thing you do in practice as a player is recorded and you're ranked based on it. So players, imagine you go to training, you're warming up and you're passing the ball. Well, how many times are you hitting it accurately or not? You do a shooting drill. How many times were your shots on target, off target? How many times did you score? A 1v1, how many times did you win, lose, or draw? Small-sided games, same thing. Every single thing you do, a sprint in training, did you beat the person to your right and your left? So it can be pretty intimidating, and it's an interesting dynamic that it creates. But what I really was able to express there, because I'm already a very competitive person. And when I say competitive, I want to get the better of my opponents. I want to better myself to be more impactful on the team. But really, I'm always competing against myself first and foremost to be better than I was yesterday. But at UNC, it was competing against yourself to get better, but competing against the opponent. But really the biggest part of it, like I mentioned at practice, was competing against your own teammates to rank higher, to outdo them. And so what I learned from that was by going all out against someone, sliding in to block a shot on them, never letting them score in 1v1, that is how you show your teammates and your opponents respect. So by going all out and competing as hard as you can, even if it means beating someone by a lot, that's how you show them the ultimate respect as an athlete and as a competitor. So it was fun for me to finally feel like I could try all out and be genuine to who I was, this competitive person, and even take that to a new level. But as I mentioned, it could be pretty rough to see the list, especially for me, as I said before, when the coach told me that I wasn't athletic enough to play at the highest level, I wasn't always the fastest player in particular. That was something that was always really sensitive to me from that point on, was I realized anytime we would get ranked in speed, vertical jump, some of the more athletic parts of the game, my name was not at the top of the list. But what I found from viewing those lists and saying, okay, am I 15th? Am I 18th? Did I get to 11th? Whatever it wasn't at the top. That honest feedback is very freeing, because rather than being nervous that this weakness of mine would be uncovered, and I think if you think about this while I'm talking, everyone listening, I'm sure, can think of some weakness or something you're a little bit self-conscious about, that if you're in a competitive environment, you're probably going to try to hide it or cover it up. But what happened at UNC was everything like that gets exposed. And in a sense, it is very freeing, because it allows you to just work to improve and to not care so much about hiding it, but just try to make it better. And it became an ongoing thing. Like I celebrated when I got to in the top 11 ranking with speed, because that was a huge improvement for me personally. Additionally, in college was the first time that I really met teammates and friends who were like me. I grew up, and as I mentioned, I was the only girl on an all boys team. I was often guest playing on teams. So I wasn't around people who really I had anything in common with, or I could be close friends with. And in college was the first time where I met a lot of people who shared my goals, and I felt the power of that. So I hope in your life you can surround yourself by people who have that same passion in the same way as you have it. And when you have a group that shares that, whether it's on your team or a team you'll be on, or another activity you do in school or an extracurricular, whatever it is, if you have a group of passionate people who share that drive and same goal, it's extremely, extremely powerful. And then last kind of big lesson I took from college soccer, because there was a ton that happened during that time that really transformed the way I thought about this game that I had loved since I was so young and I was achieving this next stage of my dream. In college was the first time I actually thought about the concept of leadership. And that was because as a sophomore, I was named one of the captains of the team. And like I said, I was a pretty shy person. I was not used to really being close friends with my teammates. So for me, it was really new to have teammates that I was close with and to be named a captain. There were players on the team who were a lot louder than me, who would get on our teammates if they weren't doing what they were supposed to. And that wasn't my way of acting at all. So in my mind, I didn't look or act like what I thought a captain should. And what I realized that my strength was as a leader was connecting with individuals kind of behind the scenes. So I was very good friends with almost everyone on the team, and I actually got to really know them, and I got to know what kind of things would motivate them. I got to know when a teammate I could tell was a little bit off or having a bad day, when we would show up at training or show up at a game. Maybe they were a little off, and I could go up to them quietly and say, "Hey, is everything okay? Are you nervous today? What's going on?" I could tell if, somebody was just exhausted and maybe needed a day off. And I could go to the coach and say, "Hey, listen, she's not going to ask, but she really needs a day off, or take it easy on her today. Something happened in her personal life, So my form of leadership, I realized, could be kind of that behind the scenes, more quiet and more compassionate leadership. It didn't have to be what I thought a captain should look like. And what I want to stress to you guys, and I'll kind of bring it back to at the end of this talk, is that passion and leadership in particular can look really different for everyone. So everybody listening in, I'm assuming, is passionate about something, whether it's soccer or otherwise, and in your own way can be a leader if you're not already. So I want you to think for yourself about what you're most passionate about and what it looks like for you, and also what ways in your life you're already a leader or you could develop into more of a leader, and to kind of think outside the box in terms of what that can look like. So college soccer, I played 4 years at the University of North Carolina. During that time, I didn't even mention all the lessons I learned. I won 2 national championships, which I'm really proud of. But to be honest, those weren't even the things I think of. Like if I had to put 4 bullets on that last slide about my college experience, the national championships didn't even make the list. And that kind of brings me into the next phase of my career, which is I signed my first professional contract for the New Jersey team, which at the time was called Sky Blue FC. And for those of you who follow the NWSL, you'll know that the team recently got a new name, Gotham FC. And so I signed my professional contract and I had done it, right? I had achieved this childhood dream. And what happened that first season as a professional player, I was back in New Jersey. I was living at home, playing in front of all these coaches and mentors in my family who had taught me everything I know in the game. It was a dream come true on paper, but I was very unhappy. That first professional season was probably the most difficult playing season I had in my entire career. We had a coach who was, I would say, probably emotionally abusive, very, very tough coach. I was in and out of the lineup. I did not feel very competent or good about myself as a player. I actually, in our home opener, I was really excited for the game. I didn't play 1 minute and I was devastated. I lost a lot of confidence. And so I started to really sit back and reflect because I said, whoa, this is crazy. And on one hand, I've achieved this lifelong dream, right? I wrote this in my journal when I was 9 years old and I just did it. Like, how proud should I feel? But why do I feel so bad? Why am I not just able to sit back and kind of enjoy this? And that's when I started to really think about what I did and what I do as a journey. And I realized that all along it had been that there's no one endpoint or one destination. So maybe for you, you want to win a championship game at the end of the season. You want to make the next level team. You want to play college soccer. Well, really, those are just points along your path, right? That's not where it ends. That's actually where a new part of the journey begins. And so I had to totally reframe my thinking because I realized, oh, this is the start of a new journey. This is not the end in any way, shape, or form. And every positive or negative that would happen along the way was just that. It was just a point along the journey. There was no end verdict, so to speak, of I've been successful or haven't. And that's something that's so important for you to take away in your thinking as you progress in the sport. Is even the top players you watch on TV, the Messis, the Alex Morgan, well, maybe not Messi, he's not even human, but the Alex Morgan, whatever player it is who you say, oh, they have made it, this is the ultimate, the best player at what they do. There is no smooth sailing for them either. They go through the same things. And I can tell you this because I've played with these players. I felt it myself when I was part of the U.S. women's national team. I have 26 caps for that team, which I'm really proud of. And even at that point when I was appearing for the U.S. national team and I was around some of the best players in the world, those players get injuries they're frustrated with. They lose confidence on their way back. They have those ups and downs where they feel great about themselves one day and then have a bad day the next. They get cut from teams. Like I said, they sit on the bench. The same things that you guys go through as players, the top players go through as well. You don't ever hit a point of smooth sailing. And that's why it's so important to develop your coping mechanisms through mental training, through building your confidence, and always remembering why it is you do what you do. And for me, a lot of that goes back to all that time I spent as a young player doing that extra work to master the tools of the game. Like I mentioned, the juggling, the striking the ball with both feet. That was a big part of why I do what I do. And I would always go back to that in these difficult times. So in kind of reflecting that first year of my first professional season, and then I went on to play 10 years professionally, literally all over the world. I came to really see what I do, like I said, as a journey, but also as what my college coach, Anson Dorrance, refers to as a never-ending path of ascension. And what that means is basically controlling the pieces of things that you can control so that you can get better every single day in some way. And whether you're injured, and that means just watching soccer and learning and growing that way, whether you're asked to play a new position, whether it's just going out and fine-tuning an element of your game, you should aim to live on this never-ending path of ascension. And that looks really different for a professional player than it does for a young player. As a professional player, your learning curve kind of slows. There can be long periods of time where you don't really feel yourself getting better. So I had to put a lot of focus into fine-tuning the smallest aspects of my performance in order to keep getting better every single day. So that kind of brings it full circle to where I ended up playing. And here's a picture of me representing the U.S. women's national team in one of my 26 appearances. And what I'll share with you guys, I don't share this publicly very often, so I'll give you guys a little personal insight, is that I had dreams along my journey that I did not accomplish. And I'm very proud when I get introduced and my resume is read, and when I tell you guys about these things that I learned from the game, which have empowered me as a person far beyond the field. I'm very proud of that, but I didn't accomplish everything I wanted to. I wanted to play in a World Cup and an Olympics. I had those things written down in my journal as well, and I did not accomplish them. I was kind of always the last midfielder cut prior to those big events. But what I learned are things that I feel transcend the sport, and that's kind of what I'm going to share to finish off. Before I do that, though, I do want to point out a couple things that I think are really interesting that I didn't know before I had my experience on the U.S. women's national team. And the first is that, as players, we're always taught you should improve your strengths and you should improve your weaknesses. And if you want to be a better player, well, you have all these weaknesses, so, make those your strengths. Well, that's not the reality of how it works at the highest level. When you really reach that top 1%, everyone is there because of the strengths they bring. And this even applies to you guys as players if you're about to go into a tryout situation. You're going to make a team because of the strengths you bring to the table. So when I was getting this experience on the U.S. national team and I was really trying to break in, I wanted to make that World Cup team, that Olympic team. What I learned I needed to focus on was not, oh, I should try to hide all my weaknesses and make sure these are better. I had to be the absolute best at my strengths as a player. So I was never going to be better at scoring goals than Carly Lloyd. I was never going to be a better tackler than Shannon Box. I wasn't going to be better protecting the ball and turning and playing the through ball than Lauren Holiday. These are the midfielders at the time I was competing with. But I could be the best on the team at my distribution, at a driven, switching the point of the attack, at using both feet to solve pressure, combining quickly in the midfield. So I realized pretty quickly that the way to impact at that level was going to be the best in the world at my strengths. And I think that that's so valuable. A message for everyone is that your strengths are what's going to get you ultimately to where you go. So as you work on improving as a player, don't neglect those. You need to focus on your weaknesses. You shouldn't ignore them, but don't neglect focusing on your strengths and really be proud of those strengths. Additionally, at the top level, the mental aspect of the game is huge. And this is another area where I'll be totally honest with you guys, I did not feel that I did a great job of attending to. Nowadays, there are all kinds of mental skills training available. There's a lot more awareness for young players coming up through the game. The mental side of the game for me was very tough. Because I had worked so hard and put everything into this, and because I was so passionate about what I did and it meant so much to me and so much of it defined me as a person, I would be really nervous and stressed when it came time for games. And I was never able, in my opinion, to fully relax and play to my potential. So I urge you, it doesn't take you having a problem. You don't need to have anything wrong in order to work on the mental skills necessary to play the game well. Building those skills, just like you build your ability to pass well with both feet, to shoot the ball, to dribble, building those skills will be vital as you work your way up the ranks. And here I put again the never-ending path of ascension. Can't say enough how important it is. Even as a pro player, my goal every single day was to get better. Even as a U.S. women's national team player, my goal every day was, okay, well, I made the roster. Now I want to dress for the game. Okay, I'm dressing for the game. Well, now I hope I sub in and I make an impact. Okay, I got on the field. Well, next game I want to start. And so that is the mindset of every single player out there, no matter where you stand, no matter if you just come off a disappointment or a personal victory, it's always looking at what now, how can I get better? So some takeaways for you before we jump into questions, because I'm excited to hear what you guys want to know from what I shared or otherwise. Everyone's journey will look different. There is no right way to achieve anything in life, let alone this path as a soccer player that you're on. So think about, what does passion look like for you? Are you passionate about what you do? And you might not even know the answer to that. But I think, and you might feel that you are, but it might look different than what I explained passion looked like to me. To me, I was so passionate that I was working all the time. I was so focused. I was so serious. So I never looked, I wasn't the one on the field who was really loud and emotional, like what you might think of when you think of a passionate soccer player, putting it all out there on the field. I was actually really reserved and often kind of tense because I was so passionate about what I was doing that it kind of had a reverse effect. So what does your passion look like, and how can you use that as an advantage in what you're doing? Second is to form an individual relationship with the game. As I mentioned just right in the beginning of the presentation, is that this is a team sport. This is a community sport to enjoy, but your individual relationship with the game, whether it's the training you do on your own, the goal setting processes you go through, your mental training, the hard extra fitness you do, maybe it's watching soccer and supporting a team or supporting players, that's what will last far beyond your time on your current team or in your current situation. And for me, that individual relationship I formed with the game is so much more important than any of the goals I achieved or didn't achieve, or any of the things I can write down on a resume. That's what keeps me involved and wanting to talk to you guys tonight. That's what's inspired me to start a business, to start a players union, to represent professional players, to make their working conditions better. That's what has kept me passionate about the game through all these years, and through the good times and the bad times. And then third is, I think we don't say this enough because I'm so serious about everything and so passionate, but enjoy the journey, because I'll tell you, it's very cliche, but you don't get the time back. And even the things that look like they might not be ideal, or they're stressful or a little frustrating, is that there's so much joy in what we do as soccer players, and we can't forget that. Remembering, why we play this game. So you can be serious and go after your goals and be passionate, but don't ever forget to have fun with it. Go out with the ball, listen to some music, joke with your friends, be competitive with them. Like I mentioned, we were in college, but make a joke of it, be able to laugh at yourself if you make a mistake. I think that, as you go, nothing is worth, it's not worth it if you don't enjoy it. And it's definitely not worth it because you will have these setbacks, these frustrations. That joy of the journey is what's going to keep you going. So those are a few messages for you. I'm excited to interact now and answer your questions on any of this.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I love what you said about points along your path. I feel like it's so easy to make a goal an endpoint, and it's interesting to think of it as like a through point. I feel like I should write that down, hang it on the wall. Okay, we will jump into some questions. Okay, first thing is the app, Technifootball. Can you talk a little about it? Our club uses it, so I think our players are aware, but we may have some visiting players who aren't familiar. So would love to hear the spiel.
Yes, sure. So Techni is actually everything I shared with you guys about my journey. It's actually my attempt at sharing that all and guiding players going through that same process. So at the most basic level, it's a training blueprint that players can follow. And I make a new training session in there each week for players to do totally individually. And you need minimal space and equipment, like a ball and a wall. You don't even need a training partner to do the training. So we work with individual players to support them in achieving their goals and tracking their improvement, and they can compete with their teammates and with others on leaderboards. And then we also work with clubs like King's Hammer to kind of elevate the culture and create this culture where it's understood that you come to practice 2-3 times a week, you have your games on the weekend, and that in the days in between, you have this guidance to continue to get better.
Amazing. And within the app, is there a place for strength and fitness training? Is there a place for goalies and players on the field? Can you talk about the details within?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. So the training content is heavily geared towards individual technical work for field players. We do have a goalkeeper section, awesome. Which is created by Nicole Barnhart, who's a legendary goalkeeper, long time. I think she has more than one gold medal in Olympic gold medal. And we also now have mental training and physical training guided by experts in those fields. So we're looking at supporting players in all those aspects of the things I mentioned that you can do at home on your own to set yourself apart.
That is so incredible, especially through the pandemic and all. Like, what a crucial thing to have. That's really great. Okay. Next question for you. What are you most proud of so far in your career as a whole?
Wow, you guys are asking some good questions. I am overall really proud that I had this vision as a young player and I was able to achieve it. I know that's not a specific answer. I think, like I said, There were things I didn't achieve, but for me to be able to look back and say, wow, when I was really young, I said I wanted to do this and I carried through and I did it, and not just played professionally, but I had a long professional career. And I guess that goes into kind of in tandem with my answer. As a professional player, it's one thing to sign a pro contract and to say, okay, I'm a pro, but to have longevity in your professional career, I think is an even greater accomplishment. And so for me, the fact that I was able to play for so long and for the majority of my career stay pretty healthy, I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. This one kind of goes along with that, but were there ever times that you felt like you lost passion?
I would say that the passion is the one thing that really carried me through. The passion and the enjoyment of what I do. Not always every day showing up at practice if I felt like a coach didn't particularly favor me or I wasn't in good standing or something. I did not enjoy that part. But that's why I think it's so important. I think back on how my individual relationship with the game allowed me to always have that core of joy that I could come back to, like going into a racquetball court in the winter and playing some music and playing with the ball. That to me, like I'll always love that and enjoy it. It doesn't matter how anything else in my life or career is going. And so that kept me passionate and that kept me enjoying things when sometimes I wasn't passionate about the team I was playing for, the situation I was in that I couldn't control. But that's why that core of things you can control, I think, is so vital to find. And like I mentioned, it could look different for everybody. So I encourage you to find the part of the game that you can control that you're most passionate about, because you can always go back to that.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about the individual aspect of such a team sport. It's really,
really
important.
I think about it so much because there were a lot of parts of the team aspect of the game I found to be really frustrating or disappointing at times. And if that's all I had, I would have certainly lost my passion at times. I was pretty defeated at times with, a coach wasn't playing me as much as I wanted, or didn't, value what I was doing, or was kind of getting on my case. And we all have had this. It doesn't mean that anything wrong with the coach. Maybe you need to hear those things, but it's tough. So for me, if I didn't have that individual relationship, I certainly would have, I think, along the way, many times lost the passion and the joy.
Yeah. Can you think of any takeaways right now from your time on the bench, times when you weren't playing?
Yeah, I think, we always hear the typical, be positive, be a good teammate. And I think that should be taken for granted. I always tried to make it so that no one would ever know if they saw me show up or warm up, or if they just were watching me, a camera was just on me, no one would ever know if I was starting and I was the captain of the team, or if I wasn't going to play 1 minute, just because I think you should always act the same. You should take it just as seriously. You should be just as respectful. And so that is incredibly important. The bottom line with that is, you can't change a coach's opinion. You can perform to the best of your ability and try your hardest, but sometimes it's actually out of your control, whether you make a team or you're on the bench or a starting player. And that's, it's the most valuable thing you can learn is to control the parts of it that you can control and to actually let go of the rest. And this is easier said than done. I can't fully do that, but the more you can separate the outcome that you cannot control and to be at peace with it by doing everything you can control and working your hardest and preparing your best. If you do that, it's a lot easier to sit back and say, okay, well, I did my part. I did everything I could do. And this is the reality of the situation. But I also think it's important to, over time, be in both environments. There's huge value in that. You should, throughout your time as a player, find a team where you feel great about your role. But it's also hugely important to experience what it's like to not love your role and to see other players and feel a little bit envious, and that you'll appreciate it even more when you get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Mirrors life in that sense.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question about technique. Do you still use it? And if so, what is your routine?
Ooh, I do use technique. And when I say I made this based on my journey, I literally made something that as a player growing up, I would have followed this. It's literally exactly what I did. Now I don't have as much time as I'd like to do my soccer training, but I actually rely on the app a lot because it's harder for me to go out and just think of stuff and do stuff. So I love to be able to just follow. And I would say right now I'm lacking the routine. I need to get back into a routine. But what I will do is I usually commit throughout the day. If I'm too busy to do a solid, 1 hour training session, I'll break up the day and I'll do 10 minutes here and there. So I'll do 10 minutes of the physical training, the core work, just in my house. Sometimes I'll just do 10 minutes. We have something called living room training. It was rainy today, so I did 10 minutes in the house. Or I'll go out to, when I'm at a wall, I'll follow the wall work session. So I wish I had more of a routine. Certainly growing up, I did pretty much what's in there as the new session each week. I would go through something like that a few times during the week.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay. This one you've kind of touched on. How was your experience as a youth player? But the tail end of this is interesting. Was there a coach in your youth experience that made a big impact positively for you?
I had wonderful coaches and mentors growing up, and I realize it more and more now. And I think for you coaches listening, hopefully you can take something away from this. But there were several coaches who were hugely impactful, and I'll share their names in case this ever gets back to them somehow through the coaching world. But the first coach who really set me going in the right direction, his name was Hammond from England. And he was the first one where I said, oh, I want to be a professional soccer player. He was like, well, can you juggle? Can you do X, Y, and Z? Here are the things you need to do to be a professional soccer player. Do you watch soccer? And my family was like, no, we don't even know what you're talking about. I didn't even know what juggling was. And I was saying I want to be a professional soccer player. And he was like, well, you want to do that? He didn't say like, haha, sure. He said, okay, well, here's what you need to be doing. Mm-hmm. And he was the coach of the boys team I was on. So he allowed me the opportunity to really stretch myself. And he showed me things now I'm thinking as a young player that to this day I would find really challenging. And so my initial thought process about this was like, I'll never achieve everything. I'm never going to have all the skills. So I'm always going to need to be working on something. And then I also had coaches along the way who would show me things because they knew my mindset. They would show me something with the ball. I had this one coach named Ricky he could do all kinds of juggling tricks. And he would show me something and he'd say, okay, juggle. And I want you to try to keep the ball up and hit this many surfaces of the body. And at the time I was thinking, what, this is impossible. But I was not going to see Ricky again to train with him until I could get at least a few of those surfaces. So I was out there practicing and practicing. And the last coach I want to mention was my coach, actually a little bit older, when I was in high school, and his name is Kazbek Tambi. We call him Kaz. And Kaz's impact on me was enormous. I was very focused on my goals as a young player, like really serious. You could even see in the pictures of me in the presentation, I had this serious face. I was like going to do this. I was going to achieve this goal. Yeah. And I don't know if I was really enjoying it now that I think back. I think I liked playing because I was good at it, and it was enjoyable in the sense of, it was a fun activity, but I didn't really have a deeper love of the sport at that time. And when I got to high school and I was playing for Kaz's team, Kaz loves soccer more than anyone I've ever met. He played on the Olympic team himself, a top level professional, and he would play with us. And you could just see, he didn't ever say anything about it, but you could see how much he loved the game and how fun it was for him because he was good. I mean, he was good. Like we could never get the ball from him. And so for me, I saw what it meant to love the sport. And I saw also how all the practice makes the game a lot more fun. If no one can ever get the ball from you, the game is amazing. It's so much more fun the better you get. So I was very inspired and still am very inspired by Kaz and what he represents in terms of the joy and the joy in being good at the sport. So yeah, I could go on with this list, but those are some of the coaches as a young player who totally transformed. I mean, I think back and there's no chance I would be having a conversation like this about my journey and feeling the way I do about it if it wasn't for them.
Mm. And then on top of that, how about as a professional player? Do any stand out?
Well, the best professional coach I had is Vlatko Andonovski, who you guys may have heard of now. He's the current coach of the U.S. women's national team. And he actually, it took me until being coached by him. He was the last 3 years I played professionally, Vlatko was my coach. And it took until that time for me actually mentally to get over that initial coach who told me I wasn't athletic enough to play at the highest level. Because I didn't believe him that I couldn't play at the highest level, but I did believe him that I wasn't athletic enough. And I had this ingrained in me, like I'm never going to be athletic enough. So I have to be good on the ball. I have to be this. And Vlatko, a quick story about him and why he was so impactful for me. Becky Sauerbrunn was our center back at FC Kansas City, and she left to go play in the Olympics. And I was playing center mid. I was an attacking player my whole career. Like, defending was certainly not my strength. And Vlatko pulled me aside and said, yeah, what do you think of playing center back? And I actually laughed at him because I was like, come on, like, don't mess with me. That's not a funny joke, Vlatko. I know I'm terrible at it. And he's like, no, I'm serious. And I said, well, you realize the forwards in this league are like double my speed. Like, I'm thinking of like Lynn Williams. Are you kidding me? Like, I'm going to play center back against her. And he's like, no, yeah, you'll like, you can read the game. You'll be fine. And you're fast enough. He was kind of like, you're fast. You'll be plenty fast. And that was the first time somebody told me I could be fast enough or I could defend. And it was like crazy to me because it literally flipped this switch that I thought, oh, somebody who I respect, who knows the game, thinks I can do this. I can do it. And so I learned to play center back. And for the next 3 years of my career, I think a pretty good center back. I actually feel that as a professional player, I was probably better as a center back than I was as a center midfielder. So, but it just took the simple belief. And for him to show me tools to be a good defender and to be fast enough, and rather than saying I couldn't do it, and it totally transformed me as an athlete and a player.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the permission to level up.
Exactly. That's well said. I'm going to write that down.
Okay, we are actually on our last question here. I have to ask, please tell us about your 4-second goal against Yale at UNC.
So my sophomore year at UNC, I actually scored what used to be the record for the fastest goal in NCAA history. Somebody beat it now, so I don't know if it's second fastest or what, but it's no longer fastest. And I shot it right from the kickoff. And the story behind it is that the game before that, our assistant coach was yelling at me right before the kickoff, shoot it, shoot it. And I was really irritated because I was an attacking center midfielder. And I was like, be quiet. I know I'm supposed to take shots during the game. They were always getting on my case. I need to shoot the ball more. So I was like, kind of like, be quiet. I can't stand this right now. And at halftime, he was like, no, the goalkeeper was off her line. I wanted you to shoot it. And I was thinking, that is really embarrassing because, I mean, 19 times out of 20, it's not going to reach, or it's going to go, it's just going to be very embarrassing. And so then, of course, the next game, he was like, okay, we'll just be aware of it in the future. And the next game I look up and the goalkeeper is pretty far off her line. And I was like, if I don't do it, I'm going to have to hear from him. So I was like, okay, I'm going for it. And when it left my foot, you guys all know when you strike the ball well and you just hit it right, you're like, oh yeah. And it left my foot. And I mean, I didn't actually expect to score. So we were all, now that I think back, it was probably very disrespectful to the opposition, but we were all cracking. I was hysterical laughing. No way this actually just happened. So that's how the fastest goal happened. And I never, never, never thought that this would be the thing that would follow me and people would know of.
Oh my God. I watched it so many times. Like what was going on in your mind?
Nothing. That's the thing. I wasn't even thinking of it.
This was like, let's go. I love it. That's great. Great story. Well, thank you so much. This has been really awesome, really inspiring, so interesting to talk to you.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was great to virtually meet everybody, and I wish you guys all the best. Hopefully you took something away that you can bring to your own journey as a player or parent or coach.
Absolutely. I know I jotted down a ton of stuff. So thanks everyone who viewed this with us live here tonight. Tell your friends if they missed out, they can watch the recording. Our next speaker is Tom Byer, so please join us here again for that. It will be Thursday, June 17th at 7 o'clock. Thanks, everyone. Good night.